Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy. Hey, friends! Welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Jamie.
And this is part 2 of the horribly tragic case of Susan Reinert, Karen Reinert, and Michael Reinert. So, obviously, if you haven't listened to part 1, you'll want to do so. Pause this episode, go back and listen to part 1, and then come back to this episode. Otherwise, this episode won't make any sense.
Yeah,
It
you're
just
not
won't.
going to like it.
There's so much detail. There's so much fucking shit.
You'd be like, who are Sue and Susan? Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be
Who the
confused.
fuck are Sue and Susan? Is this the same person? No, it's not.
Yeah.
But
Who
if
are
you
these
listen to part
twats?
1,
Yeah.
you won't have to worry about understanding who the twats are in this case.
Mhm.
I'm also sticking with my very best friend, Bourbon, Azel Bay Aidenhay. It's my attempt to wash down my feelings about this case.
Yeah.
Are you also sticking with
I'm still down with
Kanab Creek?
Kanab Creek, yeah.
Well, cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Clink, clink.
Okay. So if you'll recall from part 1, we were introduced to the main characters in this case. We met Sue Reinert, her children Karen and Michael Reinert, their father and Sue's ex-husband Ken Reinert, Sue's secret but not really secret kind of boyfriend William Sidney Bradfield Jr., and the principal of Upper Marion High School, where both Sue and Bradfield were English teachers, J. Charles Smith. We also learned about a bunch of fucking shady shit that was going down, perpetrated by Bradfield and Smith, and of Smith's unrelated but totally important robbery, weapons, and drugs conviction in May of 1979. We also learned about Bradfield's side pieces, Joanna Aiken and Wendy Ziegler.
Ooh.
So we're going to start by going back to the last time Sue and her children, Karen and Michael, were seen alive. This is the night of Friday, June 22nd, 1979. We're in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, at Sue's home on Woodcrest Ave. That evening, a summer hailstorm blew through the area, which are my all-time favorite. Summer hailstorms are the best.
Unless you're on a golf course and don't have any cover, which happened to me once and it fucking hurts. Anyway, carry on.
Sue was inside packing bags for all 3 of them, for herself and her kids, for a weekend getaway. She had planned a weekend getaway. She was on the docket to give a speech in Allentown for the Parents Without Partners group the next day, Saturday, June 23rd, some 60 miles or 97 kilometers from home. Allentown was about 60 miles one way from home. The group, the Parents Without Partners group, was hosting a weekend program, and Sue had been heavily involved in organizing it, and she had agreed to be one of the like you would say keynote speakers. Right?
Okay,
So
cool.
one of the speakers.
Yeah.
So she decided to make it a getaway for the kids. This was one of the weekends that she had them. The kids, meanwhile, were outside yucking it up in the hailstorm because that's fucking fun. And they were having fun playing with the pelting ice balls. And hopefully they didn't look up and get one in the eye.
Yeah, safety first. Cool.
Neighbors would later recall seeing them, being Karen and Michael, outside, laughing, in good spirits, playing in the hailstorm, which is haunting, knowing that that was the very last time they were ever seen again. Before they hit the road, Sue had actually called her ex-in-laws, John and Florence Reinert, Ken's parents, with whom she had remained close after her divorce from Ken. So, they really all were doing a great job with adulting here for the benefit of the children. She had called them to discuss if they felt she'd have enough fuel to drive to Allentown and back, which, like I said, 60 miles one way, 120 miles round trip, in her 1978 orangish reddish Plymouth Horizon hatchback. So In 1979, I was only 3 years old. And James, you weren't born yet, but there was a shortage of fuel in the US during the 70s. And that shortage was still raging in 1979 due to an embargo put on the US oil exports. So, all the oil exports by the United States, there was an embargo on those by OPEC. OPEC is the organization of the petroleum exporting countries. So OPEC had put an embargo on all US oil exports because of the US's support of Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Well, back in the 70s, vehicles in the US got like 12 miles to the gallon if you were fucking lucky,
Yeah.
and you didn't even get across town on 1 gallon of fuel. Like
Mhm.
they just guzzled fuel. And when the embargo hit and it dragged on for years, fuel prices basically doubled to like, hold your butt, 55 cents a gallon.
God damn.
Could you even imagine?
Oh my god, I wish.
Right? I'm old. But when I first started driving, I remember a gallon of gas being like 62 cents.
Yeah.
And I remember when it got up to like 85 cents, and I was like, how the fuck am I going to afford to drive?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so many people had to be very, very conscientious about how much fuel they used, not only because it was expensive as hell to fill up, but also because there was no guarantee you could actually get fuel when you needed it. So
Mm.
there were lines at all the gas stations. It was just fucking crazy. So after talking her fuel status through, which now that we know this embargo and how crazy the fuel thing was in the US, it makes sense that she would call and like discuss, if I have a full tank of gas, do you think I could get to and from Allentown, which is about 120 miles round trip?
Yeah.
And after talking it through, she felt confident that, yep, I could do this. So around 9 p.m., she loaded up Karen and Michael and presumably began the drive to Allentown.
Okay.
They would never make it. It was 3 days later, early in the morning, when the police dispatch received that anonymous call about a sick girl in a car in a motel parking lot.
Mm.
Now, Jack Holtz and several other authorities were on the scene trying to piece together what the hell happened and who the female body was in the hatchback. So, Holtz and his investigators were now busy with what was clearly a homicide. And as the investigation wound its way around clues and whispers of potential leads, it began to unravel a very sad and fucked up story. The autopsy of Sue's body, conducted by County Coroner Dr. William Bush, who was an internist, he was not a forensic pathologist,
Okay.
revealed that she had been beat mercilessly. Like she had just had the fucking shit beat out of her.
Mm.
She also had like a sticky residue or like a sticky substance around her mouth, nose, and in some of her hair, which suggested that she had tape, like duct
Oh,
tape
okay.
over her mouth, over her nose, over her eyes, and it was in her hair. She had a couple small red and blue fibers in her hair and on her body, and a partial fingerprint, which was never identified, was found on her body, which is amazing because finding fingerprints on a body is really hard to do, like fingerprints on skin.
Right, yeah.
Months later, toxicology results came back that showed Sue hadn't actually died from being beaten. She had died from a large lethal dose of morphine.
Oh my god.
It seemed she had probably been dead 24 to 36 hours or so due to the absence of rigor mortis, meaning she had already gone through rigor mortis and she was no longer stiff and rigid. And it takes 24 or 28 hours or so for rigor mortis to fully set in and work its way through the body. So that's
Gotcha.
why Dr. Bush was like, "Ah, she's probably been dead a day or so."
Mm.
The amount of morphine Sue had in her system was enough to kill her several times over. So there was no mistaking that she had been intentionally administered a lethal dose for the sole purpose of killing her.
Right. Ugh.
Dr. Bush found no signs of a sexual assault. So there's
Okay.
at least that silver lining. Ken Reinert, Sue's ex husband, was located and he was asked to go to the morgue to see if he could identify the woman's body as like his ex wife, Sue. And
Mm.
he did. And he confirmed, yes, that's Sue. And he was fucking distraught. Could you imagine? Like
No.
identifying a body of a once loved one or the mother of your children? Like,
Mm-mm.
and then Ken was like, So where are my children? Where are Karen and Michael?
Yeah.
And investigators were like, what now? This was the first time they learned that there were children involved. Now there was a crazy high sense of urgency. Not that they didn't have urgency to solve who Sue's murderer was, but now there was a super high sense of urgency because no trace of children, let alone two children, had been found in or around the car aside from those stuffed animals. So now investigators were like, fuck, did they get kidnapped? Are they still alive? We have to operate as if they're still alive and we need to get on this now.
Right. Yeah.
Investigators searched Sue's home on Woodcrest Ave, looking for any signs or clues that it could explain what happened, who did this, how did she end up in the Host Inn's motel's parking lot. They didn't find anything. What they found was a pile of folded clothes on both Karen and Michael's beds, which led investigators to believe that wherever Sue had gone with the children that Friday night, June 22nd, she was probably intending to return home, finish packing, and then likely continue with the weekend getaway she had planned. So at least they could rule out her home as being the murder scene.
Hmm.
They knew where her car and her body were was just a dumping site. So they still didn't know where her murder had actually occurred
Right.
or where the children's were.
Ugh.
Police had discovered that during the week prior to her murder, Sue had contacted the Parents Without Partners Allentown chapter looking for a speaker replacement for her on that Saturday. So she was supposed to do a getaway with her kids. She was packing for said getaway. Yet, the Wednesday prior to Friday night, the 22nd, and Saturday, the 23rd, when she was supposed to be in Allentown giving a speech, she had actually contacted the Parents Without Partners Allentown chapter and was looking for a speaker replacement. And she told them that she had plans that Friday evening and she was worried that she would be delayed to the speech on that Saturday and she didn't want to let anyone down. So she was just trying to arrange a speaker replacement just to be safe. So she gave the impression that she was still going to be there, but that she was probably going to be delayed.
Hmm.
Police learned that she had also contacted the hotel she was planning to stay in Allentown and had canceled her reservations. So now the police are like, God damn, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck is going on here?
And were they certain it was her? Like when she called to find a replacement for the speech, were they sure it was her?
No, they weren't certain it was her.
Okay.
Somebody who identified themselves as Sue was looking for a speaker replacement for her on Saturday.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if somebody with that organization was like, it was definitely her that
Nope.
Okay.
Police were never able to figure out how or why Sue was in the Host Inn motel parking lot. The Host Inn motel parking lot was by Harrisburg. Harrisburg was like 70 miles or like 113 kilometers southwest of Allentown and about 100 miles or 161 kilometers from Ardmore. It was like in the complete opposite direction. It was completely out of the way.
Right.
They couldn't figure
Huh.
it out. They couldn't even figure out exactly where she had gone that night, that Friday night with Karen and Michael, though authorities strongly speculated that Sue had gone to visit Bradfield. But they didn't know where and they didn't know for why when she was supposed to go out of town. Investigators questioned and cleared both Sue's ex husband, Ken, who by then had remarried and had a new baby at home. Like his new wife had given birth like not even 6 months prior. So he had like an infant at home. And so he had a really solid alibi.
Yeah.
And they questioned Sue's brother, Patrick, who lived in the Pittsburgh area, who also had a solid alibi. So they were able to clear both Ken and Patrick. So they
Okay.
began expanding the search circle around Sue, contacting friends, babysitters, coworkers, known acquaintances, maybe unknown acquaintances, anyone they stumbled upon who might have a nugget of information or clue that they didn't know that they had. Anything. They questioned both Vince Velitis and Susan Myers, who both happened to be at Susan Myers' house, the house she secretly shared with Bradfield when the police came knocking. Turns out some sources say that Vince Velitis was actually staying at the house with Susan Myers and Bradfield. Some sources are silent on it. So Vince
Hmm.
may have been living with them. I don't know. But when the police came knocking, they questioned both Velitis and Susan Myers. They both told police that they had headed to the shore in Cape May, New Jersey around 4 p.m. on Friday, June 22nd. They weren't in the Ardmore area or Harrisburg area. None of them could ever do anything to harm Suze Reinert. And no, they absolutely weren't involved in Sue's murder. And yes, they were both very upset about this news. Now, not only did they both lie to the police about what time they left for the shore, because we'll find out it wasn't 4 p.m., it was like midnight.
Oh,
They didn't make one fucking mention of all the times Bradfield told them that Smith was going to beat up and kill Sue. Neither one of them thought it might be a good idea to tell the police this.
not once.
Not one.
Wow.
Now, Velitis did, though, share with police what Bradfield had told him, that Sue Reiner was a sex fiend
Oh my God.
and probably got herself killed from one of the many guys she hooked up with.
Her little poop circle.
Yeah. And we'll hear
Ugh.
like this whole like sex cult, sex fiend, sex. It plays a big part.
Okay.
But one thing was clear to the police. Vince Velitis was clearly super uncomfortable and very, very nervous, which helped them think that they were on the right track. They believed that Velitis knew more than he was saying.
Yeah.
So investigators next turned their attention to the dispatch tape of that anonymous male caller that tipped them off to the sick woman in the car in the motel parking lot. They wanted to listen to it again and again and again to see if they could glean any clues as to who the caller was, maybe where the caller called from, in the hopes that they could narrow down who this person was so that they could question him. That's when they learned that the tape of the call had been taped over amid the quote, tape shortage crisis.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So
Gas and
poof,
tapes.
that evidence was lost. So this would become the first, what I'll call, blunder roadblock in this case. Another unfortunate blunder roadblock investigators had to contend with was Sue Reinert's body being cremated 2 days later on Wednesday, June 27th.
What?
Yeah. So the police absolutely 100% not kidding for real life sees did not want Sue's body to be cremated or buried until a more experienced forensic pathologist, of which Dr. Bush was not, as we learned,
Yeah.
had a chance to conduct a second, more thorough autopsy. But due to a glorious miscommunication between the police and Sue's brother Patrick, who mistakenly thought the police were done with Sue's body because they said, "We're done with Sue's body. You can go ahead and do what you need to do with her," like her funeral and stuff. He gave the go ahead to the funeral home to cremate her body because the police told him that he was done or that they were done. So he was like, "Oh, okay." So poof, there goes any chance to reanalyze the body.
So why did they release it?
We'll find out.
Fuck everybody in the story except
Except the
the
victims, yeah,
victims. Yeah, pretty much. And Ken.
and
Ay, ay,
Ken.
ay.
By Thursday, June 28th, the local community knew all about Sue's death, the disappearance of Karen and Michael, and that Sue had taken out some serious fucking life insurance policies on herself, naming Bradfield as the one and only beneficiary on all of them right before she was murdered. And now the community was losing its goddamn mind. The chatter and the innuendos were off the hook, as is customary when something unbelievable like this happens. So police were like, fuck. So they started to zero in on Bradfield, Pappas, Velitis, and Myers because there was some fucking shit going on there. And basically, they were following the money.
Right,
Follow the
exactly.
money, you'll find your shit, right?
Yeah.
They had found papers in Sue's home when they searched it for clues as to who killed her and where Karen and Michael might be. One such paper was a letterhead from a company called Bach and Company, which was a securities firm in the area, a very highly reputable securities firm in the area. This letter stated that Sue owned $25,000 of a $100,000 certificate that earned 12% and would pay out in 6 months. Sounds amazing.
Right.
Which
I want
lined up
in.
with what Bradfield had told Sue and what Sue had shared with her brother Patrick. So it's all lining up. Except when investigators contacted Bach and Company, firm had no record of any such transaction. They had no employee that had handled the transaction, meaning the name of the employee and the signature on that piece of paper was forged and fictitious.
Damn.
The company had never heard of a Susan Reinert, had no record of a Susan Reinert having ever been an investor with the company. So basically we're like, yeah, no, that's
Mm,
not
it's not
legit.
ours.
That's
Mm-mm.
that's a fake forged certificate. And side note, we have no idea how they got our letterhead.
Wow.
So now police were starting to think that the group of four, Bradfield, Pappas, Velitis, and Myers, had hatched a plot to kill Sue to split the insurance money. So this is what they're thinking right at this point. They learned that Bradfield and Pappas were out in Santa Fe. So they jetted out there and questioned both men. Now, if you'll recall from part one, I said that Bradfield and Pappas in the summer of 1978 went out to Santa Fe to take some classes at a college out there to further their certificate credits and all that stuff. Well, they
Right.
did the same thing again in the summer of 1979.
Okay.
They went back out to Santa Fe to that same college to take some more classes. And police figured out that they were out there. So they jetted out there to question both Bradfield and Pappas, who both professed their innocence of knowing anything about Sue's murder or the missing children. And after being questioned, Bradfield did something. He used the fireplace of a friend on two separate occasions in the Santa Fe area to burn papers and items belonging to
What?
Sue Reinert. One time he had Wendy Ziegler with him. Remember her from part one?
Yes.
The girl with whom Bradfield was cheating on Sue Reinert and Sue Myers and Joanna Aiken with. He told his friend to keep his fucking mouth shut if the police came around asking questions.
Yikes.
So he goes to this friend's house and he's like, hey, can I borrow your fireplace? I just got some stuff to burn. And oh, by the way, if the police come sniffing, you better fucking keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you.
Oof.
Wouldn't that be enough for this friend to go to the police? Like,
I would think so. Yeah. Yeah.
nobody goes to the police. It's baffling. Anyway,
Jesus.
by the end of summer, Pappas had returned to Pennsylvania from Santa Fe, and Bradfield was still in Santa Fe. Pappas returns to Philadelphia area, and he's starting to see much more clearly what's going on right in front of his face. Like he's got some distance between himself and Bradfield. Bradfield's not like blip, 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 in his ear.
Mhm.
And now he's like, holy shit. He was reading newspaper articles. He was listening to news coverage of Sue's murder, the presumed kidnapping of Karen and Michael. He's beginning to put the pieces together. These are real fucking people that he knows. What the fuck? But most notably, he started connecting the dots between the $25,000 that Sue had given Bradfield to invest and the $28,000 Bradfield had given him to wipe clean of fingerprints and stick in the safe deposit box he was told to open.
Oh my god.
Pappas remembered Bradfield telling him that the money was his life savings, but he was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, that money might have been Sue's. Now, interesting, when Sue tried to take that $25,000 out of the bank, she went to her bank and she said, I would like to withdraw $25,000. And the bank teller was like, that's a lot of money. Why do you want to do that? And Sue was like, well, I've got this great investment opportunity. My boyfriend, he's pretty amazing, and he's got this investment opportunity for me. And the teller's like, that sounds like a scam.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
let
do
me
it. I wouldn't
let
do
me get
it.
my manager. Let me get my manager. So the manager comes over and the manager's like, yeah, we have the right to refuse stuff like this when we believe that it's for nefarious purposes and we believe you're being scammed. So no. So she
Nice.
wasn't
Okay.
actually able to take out the $25,000 in one chunk. What she ended up doing was taking out smaller amounts until she had amassed $25,000. And
Mm,
this still didn't even give her, like, wait a second. That's how much she trusted Bradfield and how clever and manipulative Bradfield was.
right.
Love will make you blind. It will make you
Yeah.
blind. Now that it was clear that there were two minor children missing, presumed kidnapped, potentially taken out of the area, the case was turned over to the FBI because of like jurisdictional reasons. Holtz of Pennsylvania State Police, he was still on the case, but the FBI was now in charge of leading it, specifically Special Agent Don Redden. So Don Redden comes onto the case. And after picking up the baton, Redden was the first to connect Smith to Sue Reinert, based on the blue comb. Remember that blue comb
Mhm.
with 79th US ARCOM inscribed on it?
Yeah.
With Smith and Sue being coworkers at the Upper Marion High School, and Smith having served in the 79th United States Army Reserves Command, it was clear to Redden that there was some kind of connection here. Didn't know really what it was, but there was something here, and he just needed to figure out what that connection was and how wide and deep that connection ran. Funny fact, one of the nicknames the Pennsylvania State Police had given Bradfield was, quote, hugger mugger, because he'd hug you while plundering your purse.
Oh
And
my
it,
god.
I mean, it makes me laugh, but it makes me laugh in like a cringy way because it's so
Yeah.
fucking true.
Yeah, it
And also,
is.
I love alliteration. By this time, there were a few theories floating out there, and they were all pretty fucking fantastical. One was that Smith was a member of a cult that was made up of, quote, intellectual professionals that worshiped Satan, and that Susan, meaning Susan Reinert, was their human sacrifice to Satan.
Oh.
Another theory was that Susan had knowledge of an alleged love cult, and she was murdered to silence her.
Oh my.
It appears this theory started going around because Stefanina is Smith's wife. So one of Stefanina's coworkers was said to have shared Stefanina's diary with the press. Seems a little fantastical if you ask me. How they got Stefanina's diary is beyond me, but there you have it, allegedly. This coworker shared Stefanina's diary with the press, and this diary was a treasure chest of salacious details and rhetoric on apparent sex rings in the area and swingers parties. And this seems all highly absurd to me, but allegedly, there you have it.
Okay.
There were also alleged sightings of Karen and Michael everywhere, everywhere along the eastern seaboard. One theory also was that they were living with Smith's daughter Stephanie and her husband Eddie.
Hmm. Okay.
Yep. So remember Stephanie and Eddie Hunsberger from
Mhm.
part 1, and I said put a pin in that. So keep that pin in there cuz it's going to come back.
Okay.
Sadly, none of these sighting leads panned out. So Karen and Michael were still missing. Investigators went back over Sue's car again. So they saw that the car had a half a tank of gas. They knew she filled up the tank on Friday, June 22nd, before she was supposed to head to Allentown, presumably based on questioning Ken's parents because she had called them and, if I have a full tank, whatever.
Yeah.
Given how far away Harrisburg, which is where the Host Inn Motel's parking lot is, and also subsequently the hotel,
Mhm.
because it's next to its parking lot. uh, Given how far away Harrisburg was from Ardmore and how fuel efficient Plymouth Horizon wasn't, they deduced that the car would have likely had to have been driven directly to Harrisburg unless someone stopped for gas along the way. But if they had, the police were like, but then they would have had potentially 3 dead bodies in the car because again, they didn't know what happened to Karen and Michael. And so they were like, would somebody really stop for gas? Probably not. So this led them to believe that Harrisburg was likely not the murder scene, as we said in part 1, but more likely just the dumping ground.
Okay.
So the investigators were like, God damn it. It's like, what the fuck? Like like, where's the murder scene? So they started to get creative.
Okay.
Hmm. Sorry, I needed to take a little sippy sip.
Yeah.
So they strongly felt that Bradfield was behind Sue's murder and the children's disappearance, but they just couldn't find enough evidence to directly connect him. But during their investigation, they had learned of this so called amazing investment opportunity Bradfield had sold Sue on and the 25 G's Sue had given Bradfield. So they had found out about this and they're like, aha, because they started to follow the money. But they couldn't find that Bradfield had actually invested those dollars on Sue's behalf. There was no trail after Sue handed over the 25K to Bradfield.
Mm.
Trail goes cold.
Wow.
They're like, what the fuck happened to the money? Obviously, it's still with Bradfield. He didn't
Yeah.
invest it. So this was the first strike against Bradfield. And in late 1982, early 1983, authorities arrested Bradfield on fraud charges.
Okay.
So they're like, well, fuck, if we can't get him for actual murder and kidnapping and disappearance and a presumed murder of the children, let's at least get him on fraud charges so that we
Yeah.
can at least get him into custody. So in the late part of 1982, they arrest Bradfield on fraud charges. He was charged with stealing $25,000 from Sue, which again, in today's dollars, is about $113,000. It's a lot of fucking
Wow.
money.
Yeah.
25 grand, I stipulate, is a lot of fucking money today. It can solve a lot of problems today.
Yeah.
Imagine what it could have solved in
Oh my
1979.
god.
Bradfield went to trial, and Chris Pappas, Susan Myers, and Wendy Ziegler testified for the prosecution and shared everything they knew just in this fraud trial.
Okay.
Wendy Ziegler actually made a deal in exchange for her testimony against Bradfield. All accessory to fraud charges against her would be dropped if she would testify because she was heavily involved with like transporting all this money at Bradfield's direction.
Okay.
The trial lasted 3 days, and the jury deliberated for about 2 hours before handing back a guilty verdict. So
Good.
they convicted Bradfield of frauding Sue. Perfect. In January 1983, Bradfield was sentenced to 4 months to 2 years in jail. It's just fraud, but it's something. The
Right.
investigators like
Yeah.
something.
He's off the streets. Yeah.
A bit after Bradfield was sentenced and let off to jail, who swoops in and puts up the money to bail him out? None other than Joanna Aiken.
Oh god.
And shortly after that, Bradfield decided to set out to collect on the hundreds of thousands of dollars of life insurance that Sue had made him the sole beneficiary of.
Mm.
But Sue's family and ex husband Ken were like, no.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
You're not getting a goddamn dime. And they took their fight to the insurance companies, and the insurance companies were like, wait, what? Th- there was a murder? Like, this is an open event. Okay, well, we're going to side with Sue's family, and we're not going to pay anything out to Bradfield
Good.
because no, Bradfield was fucking pissed. He was like, I'm the sole beneficiary. She was killed. There was an accidental death rider that would see this life insurance policies paid out double in the
Oh
event
my
of her murder.
god.
All of this shit.
I like how before he was like whining about how she wants to make me the beneficiary, like it was like this big burden, and now
Mhm.
he's like fighting to get it. What a
Yep.
dick.
But he was more scared of the ongoing murder investigation because the investigators were starting to circle closer and closer and closer.
Yeah.
And so he could feel them breathing down his neck, working really, really hard to link him to Sue's murder, Karen and Michael's disappearance, both of whom, by the way, had not been found yet, or they're still missing. So Bradfield's response to the insurance fight was to just drop all of his claims to the money.
Okay.
It
Good.
was like, okay, never mind, I'm out. Forget it.
Never mind. Bye.
And if I do that, maybe just don't, go after me for murder. So the good news for everyone was Bradfield never, ever, ever saw a dollar of Sue's life insurance money, ever,
Okay,
or
good.
any part of her estate. The bad news for Bradfield, though, was that his efforts to get Sue's insurance money was the second strike against him.
Ah, okay.
Meanwhile, after all this like fraud and white collar crime and stuff going around, investigators really had been working hard to figure out what the fuck was going on. And they had uncovered a few key pieces of information that really did not look good for Bradfield. They had learned that Sue had received copies of her life insurance policies 2 days before she had been kidnapped, tortured, and killed, and even told one of the insurance agents of one of her policies that she was planning to leave the country soon. They had also learned that on the same night Sue, Karen, and Michael were last seen alive, which was Friday, June 22nd, 1979, Bradfield had driven to Cape May, New Jersey with his secret girlfriend, Joanna Aiken, and had booked 2 hotel rooms, one for himself and one for his mates. And on the way back home, Bradfield dropped Aiken off at a hotel in downtown Philly where she stayed in a room for about a month, registered under Mr. and Mrs. Bradfield.
Gross.
Authorities had also learned that not only did Sue Reinert believe she was moving to England in the summer of 1979 with Bradfield to start their new life together, but so did his live in secret girlfriend, Susan Myers.
Mm.
Bradfield had been spinning this web with both of them, though for why I'm not sure. I know why he was spinning that tale with Sue Reiner, but I'm not sure why he was with Susan Myers.
His twattery is off the charts.
I can't figure out what he was trying to accomplish there because in reality, Bradfield had enrolled in a summer class he was intending to take at a college in Santa Fe, the same college he took a class at during the previous summer of 1978. So in part one, we learned that in the summer of 1979, he was also in Santa Fe with his good buddy Chris Pappas to take classes at a college there to like keep his certification up or learn new skills or whatever. The first day that class was set to start was Monday, June 25th, 1979, the same exact day Susan's beaten and bound body was discovered in the hatchback of her car.
Mm.
Bradfield had even purchased plane tickets to fly to Santa Fe on Friday, June 22nd with his broski, Chris Pappas. They were going to fly out on Friday, June 22nd, which is contradictory to the motel reservations he made in Cape May, New Jersey for that very same weekend. So
Yeah.
naturally, Pappas was really fucking confused. And he's like, hey, listen, buddy, why are you planning to go to Cape May when you like we have tickets to go to Santa Fe because classes start June 25th, Monday, June 25th.
Yeah.
We're going to fly. And Bradfield said, hey, look, I'm nervous that this will be the weekend that Smith is going to kill Sue Reiner.
Oh my God.
Really, really nervous about it. This is the last weekend Smith has to do it before his sentencing hearing on all his robbery and like drug possession and weapons charges. Dude, I don't want to get caught up in this, so we need to go to the shore, which was Cape May, New Jersey, the beach. And you have to come with me because you have to be my alibi. And Pappas was like, yo, being 2,000 miles away in Santa Fe would be like an excellent alibi. So why don't we just fly to Santa
Yeah.
Fe like we were supposed to
What the
on,
fuck?
yeah. And we already have the plane tickets. So let's just go to Santa Fe. And Bradfield was like, dude. I can't. I need to stay kind of local because I might have to be a character witness for Smith during his hearing on Monday, the same day Sue's body was found in the parking lot of the Hostin Motel. So already it's like super confusing and none of this makes any fucking sense. It's like Bradfield's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He told Pappas that Smith's hearing was being held in a courthouse in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which just so happened to be in close proximity to the Hostin Motel where Sue's body was found in her car. So on Monday, June 25th, Smith is supposed to attend his sentencing hearing in a courthouse in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is like bloop, from the Host Inn Motel where Sue's car and body were found. Bradfield also told his buddy Vince Velitis and his girlfriend Susan Myers that they also needed to go to the shore with him and be part of his alibi. Velitis told Bradfield, "Hey, yeah, would love to help you out there, buddy, but I can't because I have a summer job because I'm a teacher and I only get paid for 9 months of the year, and so I get a job in the summer to make more money, and so I'm going to do that, and so yeah, I can't go." And Bradfield was like, "You don't have a choice. Smith is definitely going to hurt Sue Reinert this very weekend, and he, meaning Bradfield, needed to have his friends close so they could vouch for his whereabouts, and he was going to the shore with him, and that was final."
Or instead of that, let's protect Sue.
Still, as I declared in part one, nobody has gone to the fucking police or has said anything to Sue. Nobody.
Yeah, let's make this huge, complicated fucking circle jerk of alibis. Or we could just, you know, protect Sue and make sure she's good. Make sure she doesn't get killed this weekend. But nope. Whatever. I don't know.
That is a perfect way to describe this whole fucking thing. A huge, complicated circle jerk. That's exactly what this is. So on Friday, June 22nd, again, the same night Sue, Karen, and Michael were last seen alive, Bradfield instructed Pappas, hey, I need you to buy another set of plane tickets for us for Monday night, June 25th, to Santa Fe. I know that I already had you purchase tickets for tonight, but we're not going to go tonight. We're going to go to the shore in Cape May, New Jersey. And you're coming with me because you're going to be my alibi. But we're still going to go to Santa Fe for the summer. So I need you to buy tickets for flights on Monday, June 25th. Do that today, and I'll pick you up tonight to head to the shore. So make sure you're ready. That afternoon, Bradfield picked up Wendy Ziegler and drove her to the motel that she was staying in. And on the way, he told her everything that was happening with Smith, that he was exhausted with the whole thing, that Smith was planning to kill Sue Reinert that weekend. There wasn't anything else he could do to protect Sue, and that Susan Myers was also on Smith's hit list.
Oh my God.
This was the first and last time Bradfield mentioned anything about Susan Myers being harmed by Smith to anyone. So he says this to Wendy Ziegler. Later that same day in the after dinner hours, think like 7:30, Bradfield picked Wendy up from the motel that he had previously dropped her off in earlier that day and took her to the bank where he had that safe deposit box that I mentioned in part 1 and told her to remove all the money that was in it. He told Wendy that if Smith does kill Sue that weekend, his accounts might be frozen because, I was named the executor of her will and the sole beneficiary of all of her life insurance monies. And he told Wendy, look, take this money to your house, hide it in a safe place where no one, including your parents, can find it. Because remember, Wendy is all of 20 years old. She's a
Jesus.
kid. She's a college
Ugh.
student still living at home with her parents in Pennsylvania when she's home on break, and she's not at college in California because she was attending college in California. She's a baby. Then Bradfield dropped Wendy off at her friend Jenny's house, who also knew all about Smith planning to murder Sue Reiner that weekend. Chris Pappas was also at Jenny's house at this time. So everybody is just super hunky dory friends. Like you said, we've got this fucking complicated circle jerk. So everybody's friends. Everybody knows that Smith is supposed to be harming Sue, but nobody's doing anything about it. And from 8:30 p.m. to about 11:30 p.m., the evening of Friday, June 22nd, 1979, the very same night that Sue and Karen and Michael were ever seen alive again, no one can account for where Bradfield was. He went
Hmm.
missing for like 3 hours.
Jesus Christ.
But by midnight, Bradfield popped back on the scene.
Of course.
He met up with Chris Pappas, Vince Velitis, and Susan Myers, and they began their drive to the shore in Cape May, New Jersey, to establish Bradfield's alibi. It's unclear who did the driving. It doesn't really matter. We do know that Bradfield likely wasn't driving. Randomly during the drive, Bradfield shared with others something along the lines of, well, this is it. Smith is going to kill Sue Reinert this weekend. I did fucking everything I could to protect her, but it just wasn't enough. And he even put Smith at Sue's home that very evening, suggesting that he himself had been keeping watch over Sue's house, to protect her and keep her safe. And he saw Smith there, but then lost sight of him in the hailstorm because the pellets were so fucking big.
Oh my God.
Small rabbit hole here. Let me tell you about that fucking safe deposit box. So, several months prior, Bradfield took Pappas to the bank and told him to open a safe deposit box under his name, not Bradfield's name, Chris Pappas's name. So Bradfield told Chris, hey, I need you to open a safe deposit box under your name.
Hmm.
And also, I need you to put Wendy Ziegler and Susan Myers as co-signers on this box. Not me. Not me. I don't, this is not my safe deposit box. This is your safe deposit box. And Susan Myers and Wendy Ziegler are co-signers. Not me, though. Not me. I don't have anything to do with this. Then he gave Pappas those kill items that Smith had allegedly given to him. Remember this from part 1? An eyedropper full of acid, a
Hmm.
357 Magnum. So he gave these items to Pappas and he said, put these items in the box. He also gave Pappas almost 30K in cash. I think it was like 28,500. 25 of which was the cash that Sue Reinert had given Bradfield to invest on her behalf. But nobody knew this.
Mm.
Nobody knew this. So actually, it was Sue's money. Again, as I mentioned in part 1, he also had Pappas wipe the cash clean of fingerprints. Did you know you could wipe cash clean of fingerprints? I didn't know
No.
you could do that. Can you
I know.
actually do that?
I didn't know you needed to.
Can you imagine the distribution of monetary bills in the United States?
Hmm.
How many fucking fingerprints have got to
Oh
be
my
on those
God.
bills? They're literally the dirtiest thing ever. They're dirtier than like a toilet bowl and a kitchen sink.
Mhm.
Side note, everybody, if you're carrying cash, it's sanitize your hands.
Yeah,
Um,
it's disgusting. Ugh.
it absolutely astounds me that Pappas didn't get as far away as he possibly could from Bradfield. It astounds me that he didn't go to the authorities to spill his guts. I'm just, you know what I am? I'm gobsmacked.
You are gobsmacked.
So, Bradfield, Pappas, Velitis, and Myers, they spent the weekend at the shore in Cape May, New Jersey, setting up an alibi for Bradfield. They headed back home on Monday, June 25th. We're still in 1979 here. And that evening, Velitis and Myers helped Bradfield load up his car under the presumption that he was driving to Santa Fe, New Mexico to attend that summer class for the summer. Well, Bradfield was still planning to fly to Santa Fe with Pappas. And when he hooked up with Pappas at the airport, he told him that Joanna Akins was actually going to drive his car to Santa Fe and spend the summer out there for them, with them, excuse me,
Oh, fun.
unbeknownst to Miss Susan Myers. The live-in girlfriend of Bradfield.
Yeah, that's a pickle.
On Monday, June 25th, that very same morning that Sue Reinert's lifeless body was found, Smith was due in a Harrisburg, Pennsylvania courtroom for his sentencing hearing on his charges of robbery, weapons, and drug possession, as I had mentioned. He showed up. The judge handed down 2 to 5 years in a Pennsylvania prison, and he was escorted off to jail. Now, interestingly, he was anywhere from 20 minutes to a whole ass fucking hour late for his hearing. There are conflicting sources on this detail, but suffice it to say, he was notably late to his sentencing hearing. His excuse to the court was either that he was A, waiting in line to fuel up his car because, again, oil embargo in full swing, or B, that he was supposed to be given a ride to the courthouse by a friend who never showed up. Again, there are conflicting sources on this. Suffice it to say, he was late and he gave some lame ass excuse.
Right.
The logistical nugget that was very interesting to investigators was simply due to the courthouse's close proximity to the host and motel, as I mentioned. They
Yeah.
were like, bloop.
Fuck that.
Finally, in 1983, so now we're 4 years past when Sue Reinert was murdered and Karen and Michael disappeared. Investigators believed they had finally gathered enough evidence to arrest Bradfield and charge him with 3 counts of murder for Sue, Karen, and Michael, kidnapping, solicitation to commit murder, conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder, and the icing on the cake, the obstruction of the administration of law. This was because Bradfield started to get sloppy. While he was in jail on fraud charges for stealing that 25 G's from Sue, but before Joanna Aiken was able to bail him out, he played chess to pass the time with another inmate, a 23-year-old by the name of Proctor Newell. And when Bradfield played, apparently he ran his mouth. And when he ran his mouth, he told Newell that the only reason Sue was killed was because he needed money. And if he hadn't needed money, she would be alive today and he wouldn't be caught up in her murder trial. Bradfield also told Newell that only Sue was supposed to be killed, but that unfortunately the children were with her that night, and that is just a fucking shame that they had to suffer. But that when Karen and Michael were killed, he had been present.
Mm.
And just as unfortunate, jailhouse snitch Newell was a raging alcoholic with 12 arrests under his belt in the last 7 years, was the prosecution's key witness against Bradfield, and really wasn't all that reliable because he's a jailhouse snitch.
Right. Ugh.
Now, Newell said that the only reason he told authorities what Bradfield told him was because he was really worried about those 2 kids because he had 2 kids of his own. So he had a lot of empathy there. And basically, Newell was claiming he wasn't looking for anything in return for sharing what he knew. He just wanted to do right by Karen and Michael, which ended up actually being the case. He didn't get any special treatment for being an informant. But what he had to share was pretty helpful
Right. Yeah.
if it was true. But it was enough. Bradfield was arrested on April 6th, 1983, and when the grand jury questioned many of the individuals investigators found were involved, they specifically and extensively questioned Bradfield's friends Chris Pappas and Vince Velitis, as well as Bradfield's live-in secret, nobody really knows girlfriend, Susan Myers. And all 3 gave similar stories of Bradfield repeatedly telling them that Smith was planning to kill Sue Reinert, that he was going to beat her up and torture her before he killed her, and told Pappas and Velitis that if they went to the police with what they knew, that Smith would kill them too.
Damn.
Bradfield had an intensely strong hold over his friends, but eventually, when they became more scared of not cooperating in a murder investigation than they were scared of Bradfield, they began to share what they knew. So
Good.
finally, they began to share. Vince Velitis was the first to cooperate. And when Bradfield found out he was talking to investigators, he reportedly became extraordinarily angry at Velitis and told Velitis that he had just, quote, killed him. Unbelievably, Bradfield told Chris Pappas and Susan Myers what Velitis had done to him and that he had just signed his death warrant, meaning because Velitis was cooperating with investigators, he had just signed Bradfield's death warrant, and
Right.
that
Yeah.
perhaps Velitis needed to be killed because he's cooperating with the police.
Oh my God.
Bradfield told Myers and Pappas that they should both hire lawyers and keep their goddamn mouths shut.
Whoa.
2 years later, Susan Myers started cooperating with police. It took 2 fucking years after all
God
of that for
damn,
her to
Susan.
cooperate, shortly followed by Chris Pappas.
Okay. I mean, finally, but Jesus.
Yeah. Ultimately, the police learned that Bradfield had insisted that Pappas, Velitis, and Myers go to Cape May, New Jersey with him the weekend Sue Reinert was murdered, because if Smith was going to kill Sue, it was going to be that weekend, and he wanted his friends with him so they could verify his whereabouts when police came calling, except from 8:30 to 11:30 p.m. Of course, Bradfield protested very loudly when he was arrested for murder, claiming he was innocent and wasn't even in the area that weekend. When questioned, he told investigators that he had been at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey with his besties, Chris Pappas and Vince Velitis, as well as his one and only sweetie, Susan Myers. He said they could vouch for his whereabouts that weekend and that he was far, far away when Sue was murdered. Bradfield also insisted that he never loved Sue. They had never been in a romantic relationship. She wasn't his type. She was too unattractive.
Oh
She
my
was too
God.
mousy. He insisted he only looked at Sue as a friend and had only ever tried to protect her from Smith.
Okay. Yeah. Dick face.
It's a disgusting way that he like smeared her memory. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ugh, just it makes turns
I
my
know.
stomach a little. Bradfield's trial started in October of 1983 and lasted just a couple of weeks, so it was pretty quick. He testified in his own defense and told the jury that he never dated Sue, never had any romantic interest in Sue, was surprised when he learned she had made him the executor of her estate, as well as the sole beneficiary on all of her life insurance policies, and that he had no idea who killed her. The jury didn't believe him, and after deliberating for just over an hour, they found Bradfield guilty on 3 counts of murder on October 28th, 1983.
Good.
Yep. The judge subsequently sentenced Bradfield to 3 life sentences to be served consecutively without the possibility of parole for any of them, thus securing Bradfield's fate of never ever spending another free day outside of prison.
Nice.
Bradfield, for his part in all this, aside from killing people, never stopped protesting his innocence. Never stopped. So if you thought that was all interesting, we're now just starting to get to the good part.
Oh.
Meanwhile, remember Jack Holtz, the Pennsylvania state
Mm-hmm.
trooper that was
Yeah.
originally the lead investigator? Well, he was still working on the case, and he had discovered something that had been overlooked. He found a note in the case files about 2 guys from South Carolina who worked at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant, which it's situated just south of Harrisburg, so it's in that general same area where the Host Inn Motel is located. And these 2 individuals, these 2 dudes, they were staying at the motel Sunday evening, June 24th, and they noticed the orangish reddish Plymouth Horizon hatchback in the motel's parking lot with the hatchback open and what looked like somebody laying in the back. And they actually called the police. And when they
Really?
called the police to say, hey, there's this really sketch car and it looks like somebody might be like passed out in the car, you might want to come look at it. They made this call around 7 p.m. the night of Sunday, June 24th.
Okay.
So around 7 p.m., they made this call. So now Holtz was able to narrow down that Sue's body had been dumped at the Host Inn Motel by 7 p.m. on Sunday evening. So it was able to narrow down her death, like time of death. She was last
Right.
seen Friday night. Yep. Okay. What made this interesting is not only being able to narrow down when Sue was likely killed, but when investigators were combing through Smith's phone records, they found something that seemed interesting, odd, weird, something that seemed to line up, but they didn't know how it was lining up. At 8:37 p.m., the night of Sunday, June 24th, Smith made a phone call to his lawyer from his home in King of Prussia. The drive from the Host Inn Motel to Smith's home was about 90 minutes. Smith's phone call to his lawyer that Sunday evening was the first time anyone could account for where Smith was since Friday evening.
Wow.
Whole weekend, nobody could account for Smith's whereabouts. Two dudes call the police dispatch saying there's this weird car and somebody seems to be passed out in it. That was around 7 p.m. 90 minutes later, give or take, Smith is making a phone call to his lawyer. So the police were like, that seems weird and janky. We're not sure how it all lines up, but that just seems, could it be coincidence? I don't know. So now that Bradfield had been convicted of the murders of Susan, Karen, and Michael, authorities turned their attention to Bradfield and Smith's connection with one another and began intensely investigating Smith. With Bradfield having told his friends on numerous occasions that Smith was going to kill Sue and beat her up, and having told his friends while they were at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey, that Smith was planning to kill Sue that very weekend, authorities were now convinced that Bradfield and Smith had to be in cahoots somehow. They had to be working together somehow, some way, orchestrating these murders together, and that Pappas, Velitis, and Myers probably weren't really involved and had been at most unwitting accessories.
Yeah.
What they unearthed against Smith seemed damning. They had a strand of hair similar to Sue Reinert's hair that had been found in Smith's home, a pin similar to one seen worn by Karen, Sue Reinert's daughter, from a school field trip prior to her disappearance. This pin was found in Smith's car. The 79th US ARCOM blue comb that was found under Sue's body was the exact unit Smith served in as a colonel,
Hmm.
and the chains around Sue's body that matched the chains found in Smith's basement. To top it all off, no one was able to account for Smith's whereabouts, like I said, for that entire weekend.
Yeah.
They also had two jailhouse informants come forward. The first was a guy by the name of Raymond Martray. Raymond Martray, in 1981, had been in the same jail as Smith when Smith had been convicted on charges of robbery, weapons, and drugs. Martray had contacted the state police, telling them that he was a friend of Smith's and said that Smith told him that Bradfield had asked Smith to help him murder Sue Reiner because Smith knew that Bradfield had perjured himself on the stand when Bradfield had testified on behalf of Smith and lied under oath that Smith couldn't have possibly committed one of the Sears robberies because Smith was supposedly in Ocean City, Maryland,
Right.
with him
Yeah.
at the same time that the robbery occurred, and they magically happened to run into each other.
Right.
Sue Reinert knew this wasn't true, and Bradfield wanted Smith's help in killing Sue to keep her quiet. Martray alleged that when he asked Smith about what had happened to Karen and Michael, Smith simply told him, I took care of it. Martray also said that during another conversation about Sue Reinert's murder, Smith got heated and said, quote, I killed the fucking bitch.
Whoa.
The second jailhouse informant guy was a guy by the name of Charles Montoine, who had been in the same jail cell as, or same jail as Smith. I don't know if they shared the same cell, but they were in the same jail. Maybe they found each other in General Pop. You know what I'm saying?
Probably so.
Montoine told authorities that Smith talked to him about how to murder someone and that the best way is to inject drugs into victims to overdose them. And that you want to let a body
What?
lie around for a couple of days after death so that all the blood kind of like, coagulates. And then it makes it easier for you to cut the person up into little pieces so you can dispose of the body parts easier.
Gross.
Montoine further shared that Smith said that smaller body parts fit really well into drums and buckets, and that you could also weigh pieces down with chains and dispose of them in bodies of water.
Yikes.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this is what Montoine is telling authorities. And to top this super amazing conversation off, Smith allegedly told Montoine that um, in 7 years of not finding Sue Reiner's body, to have her declared legally dead, but that Bradfield's greed and getting her money caused all of these problems they were now dealing with because of the idea that you have to have a body in order to collect life insurance money. But if Bradfield hadn't been so fucking greedy and he just, got rid of Sue's body and just like let 7 years go by so she could be declared legally dead, nobody would be the wiser.
Oh my
Bradfield
God.
got greedy. And so Smith apparently told Montoine that he felt like Bradfield was trying to set him up to take all the fall for Sue's murder, that he wasn't worried about it because Bradfield going to the cops wasn't really a thing because he had no idea where the bodies were, meaning Karen and Michael's bodies.
Right. Yeah.
It just
Ugh.
seems, I don't believe this. This
Yeah.
seems highly disbelievable. It seems concocted. It seems fucking weird, like Montoine wanted. If he even said any of this stuff, like he wanted some, I don't know. Anyway, I think it's a bunch of malarkey, but nevertheless, this allegedly happened. This conversation allegedly happened.
Yeah.
On June 25th, 1985, very ironically, 6 years to the fucking day after Sue was murdered, Smith, who was sitting in jail for all of his other nonsense, was arrested on conspiracy to commit murder and was transferred to Camp Hill State Correctional Institute to be held until his preliminary hearing, which occurred in late July of 1985.
Okay.
Sufficient cause was established, and that paved the way for the trial. So the preliminary hearing happened, sufficient cause was established, trial was set. The defense's strategy was to show that Bradfield was a master manipulator and was setting Smith up to take the fall for Sue's murder. The defense's working theory was that Sue Reinert had been murdered by Bradfield in Cape May, New Jersey, at the shore. That was the defense's whole
Hmm.
strategy.
Okay.
It didn't work. And after deliberating for just 5 hours, the jury handed down a guilty verdict on April 30th, 1986.
Okay.
And shortly after the trial, at the sentencing hearing, the jury deliberated for 6 hours and came back with the death penalty.
Whoa.
They gave Smith the death penalty, for Sue, the death penalty for Karen, and the death penalty for Michael.
Wow.
And the defense was like, uh,
Mhm.
we request that the jury be polled. This meant that each juror would specifically be asked what their verdicts were for the death of Sue Reinert, as well as the presumed deaths of Karen Reinert and Michael Reinert. So each of the 12 jurors were asked this question, and each of the 12 jurors had to say death 3 times, one for each Reinert. That must have been quite the experience. Could you
Yeah.
imagine being in the courtroom sitting through hearing each juror repeat the word death 3 times?
No.
That's
Mm-mm.
36 times. Wait, did I do the math right? 12 times 6,
Yes. Yeah.
36 times that the word death was repeated. It just seems so egregious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, in 1986, Bradfield's conviction appeal was denied. So when he was sentenced to 3 life sentences, to be served consecutively, he appealed that. And in 1986, he got his answer back and it was denied.
Okay.
He had appealed on the grounds of ineffective counsel, which everybody tries to do.
Yeah.
In 1987, Karen and Michael were declared legally dead 8 years after they had disappeared.
Hmm.
But things got real interesting again in 1988 when Smith's public defender, William Kostopoulos, discovered that the prosecution had knowingly and intentionally withheld evidence that supported the defense's claims that Smith was being set up by Bradfield to take the fall for Sue's murder. This evidence had come to the prosecution's attention during the last week of Smith's trial in 1986, but had been withheld from the defense until it was finally turned over in 1988. And this evidence, my friend, was a fucking game changer. I love the look on your face right now. I wish everybody could see your face. You're like, oh my God, what happened?
What is it?
Remember when I said authorities speculated that Sue had gone to see Bradfield before heading to Allentown on Friday,
Yes.
June 22nd, 1979? When
Uh-huh.
investigators were collecting evidence from Sue's body, adhesive strips had been used to lift whatever microscopic things, particles, whatever might be on Sue's body.
Mhm.
Particles of sand had been found on two adhesive strips, and these two particular adhesive strips had lifted these sand particles from the bottom of Sue's bare feet.
Ooh.
Kostopoulos claimed that this evidence was proof that Smith was innocent and that Sue had indeed been murdered by Bradfield at the shore in Cape May, New Jersey. No, it wasn't Professor Purple with the candlestick in the library. Well, you can imagine the fucking uproar this new evidence caused. People were losing their goddamn minds over this, and it allowed Smith to be granted a new trial in December 1989, 3.5 years after he was sentenced to death.
Wow.
And as preparation to have a new trial was underway, something else happened that flipped everything upside down again. A Wellsville flea market vendor and, person that will like clean out junk from homes,
Mm.
like a junk cleaner,
Yeah.
by the name of Mark A. Hughes was hired by none other than Pennsylvania State Trooper Jack Holtz to clean out the attic in the basement of the house Holtz lived in. Cool. Okay. Side note, when vendors are called in to clean out stuff, especially flea market vendors or like pawn dealers,
Mhm.
they are often the ones that will go into homes and clean out stuff. They're going to look through everything. And the idea is they'll do it for free if they get to keep anything of value.
Right, and then they can turn around and sell it and yada yada.
Exactly. So as Hughes was going through one of the boxes he had removed from Holtz's attic, he realized what he was looking at. In this box, he found a duplicate blue comb that was identical to the blue comb found under Sue's body in the hatchback of her car with the inscription 79th US ARCOM. Turns out that this was one of roughly 20,000 identical 79th US ARCOM combs that had been distributed to those in the area that had served in that Air Force command. It wasn't unique. There were all kinds of these combs floating around. And it was clear that the comb presented at trial as having been the comb found under Sue's body in the hatchback of her Plymouth Horizon wasn't actually the comb, because that comb was still sitting in an evidence bag with FBI markers all over it. This gave the strong suggestion that this comb had been planted.
Oh.
So that was one thing that Mr. Hughes found in this box. He also found 23 notebooks full of notes and details about the investigation written by Jack Holtz. And these notebooks were numbered and dated in sequential order. However, there was one notebook missing, notebook lucky number 13.
Mm.
Kostopoulos believed that this notebook contained detailed information about Holt's discussions with jailhouse informant Raymond Martre. Kostopoulos further believed that Martre was offered a deal in exchange for his testimony against Smith, saying that Smith confessed to him that he killed Sue, Karen, and Michael, but that in actuality, Smith told Martre that he did not kill Sue, Karen, and Michael. This is because in another notebook written and kept by Holtz, he wrote that in a discussion he had with another jailhouse informant, the informant wasn't named in this note, so we don't know who Holtz was specifically referring to. Bradfield had allegedly confessed that he killed Sue, Karen, and Michael alone with no one helping him. It came out in 1988 that state police helped Martre get released from jail in exchange for his testimony against Smith, which the police lied about to the jury.
Ooh.
There's so much fucking shit, it just blows my mind. In the petition that public defender Kostopoulos had filed requesting a new trial for Smith, he further asked for double jeopardy to be implemented, given all the new incriminating evidence suggesting Smith may be innocent, and the prosecution intentionally withheld from the defense. Kostopoulos included in his petition the following facts. Number one, that the hair and fiber evidence the prosecution used to link Smith to Sue's car and murder was literally lost from 1983 to the middle of Smith's trial in 1986 when it was magically found again,
Hmm.
introduced into evidence. Receipts that directly contradicted the alibi Bradfield gave, being at the shore, went missing and were never found.
Hmm.
The 911 tape with the anonymous mail caller directing authorities to Sue's car and body were mistakenly destroyed. Sue Reinert's body was cremated unintentionally early due to a alleged miscommunication by the police, eliminating any chance of a deeper analysis being performed. And number 5, the audio tape by Dr. William Bush when he conducted the autopsy on Sue Reinert's body was mysteriously misplaced until after Smith's trial had concluded.
Hmm.
Pretty damning.
Yeah.
But if you thought this
Wow.
was great, there were 2 other items Hughes found in the box that were of even more importance. The first was a series of investigative notes that completely contradicted prosecution testimony that was given in Smith's trial, which further suggested a frame job because the prosecution had knowingly and intentionally withheld game changing evidence at Smith's trial. But this second thing that Hughes found, and I cannot stress this enough, is fucking wild. Hughes discovered a letter that had been written on January 29th, 1981. So, 2 years before Bradfield was arrested for murder and 4 years before Smith was arrested for murder.
Hmm.
This letter was written by author Joseph Wamba, who was a former Los Angeles Police Department homicide detective who wrote the bestseller Echoes in the Darkness about this case. In this letter, Wamba offered Holtz's partner, Sergeant Joseph Van Noort, who by this time had passed away, Wamba offered him $50,000 for information before there were any arrests. There were 2 caveats to this. One was that Wamba insisted that regardless, Smith needed to be arrested and convicted. And the other was a PS note that Wamba had written at the bottom of his letter that said, quote, "Since I would start the legwork immediately, we should be very careful about being seen together for the sake of your job. As far as witnesses would know, I received all my information from news stories and anonymous tips."
Whoa.
The implication here is that Wamba needed Smith to be arrested and convicted. Otherwise, his book would be useless because he says Smith was the murderer.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be able to turn it into a TV miniseries, which he did, or collect on the advances of the book and miniseries or future royalties, which he did. This is because in this book, as I said, Wamba wrote that Smith was guilty of being in cahoots with Bradfield and was directly involved in the murder of Sue Reinert and the presumed murders of Karen and Michael Reinert. And additionally, in all his interviews with Holtz, Wamba knew Holtz had evidence that showed Smith did not murder Sue, Karen, and Michael.
Wow.
So Kostopoulos wrote one hell of a petition. And
Yeah.
in 1992, after serving 6 years on death row, a unanimous decision was handed down that vacated Smith's death penalty conviction. He was
Okay.
immediately freed based on horrible prosecutorial misconduct, and he could never, ever, ever be retried again due to the double jeopardy law because the prosecution had engaged in so much fucking wrongdoing that it would be a violation of Smith's constitutional protections.
Wow.
Isn't this
That's
fucking
crazy.
crazy?
Yeah. This is bananas.
In 1998, a civil rights lawsuit Smith had filed was rejected. Basically, it was like, you like fucked with my rights and I
Right.
want lots
Yeah.
of money. It was rejected. He contended that his civil rights were impinged upon when he was framed for the murders and was subjected to serious prosecutorial corruption. Smith died in 2009 of heart disease at Wilkes-Barre General Hospital after a brief stay due to health issues. He was 80 years old. Until his death, Smith fought to clear his name, including through very public quarrels with Joseph Wamba, who Smith accused of working with authorities to frame Smith so that Wamba's book would be in hot demand.
Hmm.
Smith even wrote a book that held Wamba directly responsible for his conviction.
Damn.
Okay, so remember Smith's daughter Stephanie and her husband
Mm-hmm.
Eddie?
Yeah.
Stephanie Smith was born in 1954. And while I couldn't find specifics about her childhood, what we do know is that she had a very troubled upbringing and a very troubled relationship with her father, J. Charles Smith. Around the time she graduated high school in 1972, her life was ruled by her addiction to heroin.
Mm.
She moved out of her parents' home and lived on the streets for several years. She eventually met Edward Hunsberger, an unhomed guy who was also addicted to heroin. Edward was born in 1948, so he's a bit older than Stephanie, and their relationship was incredibly codependent, and it was ruled by their addiction. Their
Mm.
only mission in life was to get enough money to get their next fix.
Yeah.
That was it. Neither had regular jobs. They simply couldn't with their addictions. And often Stephanie would earn money through sex work on the streets of Philadelphia. In 1977, Stephanie and Edward got married, and it seems they really wanted to get off the drugs and off the streets. So in September of that year, despite Stephanie's strained relationship with her father, they both moved into Smith's home in King of Prussia. Now remember, Smith's wife, Stephanina, is still alive at this time. She didn't succumb to her cancer until August of 1979. So
Hmm.
they moved back home. Smith was still the principal of Upper Marion High School at this time. He stopped being the principal in 1978. And for several months, things seemed stable. On February 25th, 1978, Stephanie and Edward made their way to North Wales, Pennsylvania, roughly an 18-mile or 29-kilometer drive to visit Edward's parents. That's where Ed's parents lived. And after visiting for a little while, both Stephanie and Ed went out, and Ed told his mom, "Hey, mom, we'll be back in a little while. We'll be back." This would be the last legitimate time Stephanie and Ed were both ever seen alive.
What?
After a few weeks, Ed's parents finally followed their gut instinct and they contacted Smith and they were like, "Hey, buddy, do you know where Ed and Stephanie are? Because they were visiting a couple weeks ago and they were like supposed to come back and they never come back and it's been like weeks. Like, do you know where they are? We're worried." And Smith told them that they owed a ton of money to some drug lords. And so they hightailed it to California and they went into hiding. And they left so fast that they left everything behind, even like their toothbrushes. Now, these are two heroin addicts. They don't have a fucking pot to piss in. They don't have anything to their name, but what they do have to their name is their clothing. They're like minimal amount of personal effects and their fucking toothbrushes. They didn't bring
Right.
anything. They
Wow.
didn't bring anything. They also left an income tax check that they had received but hadn't had the chance to cash yet. So right there you know Smith's story is bullshit because
Oh, for
there's no
sure.
fucking way they would leave money on the table.
Yeah, exactly.
Further, Ed at the time was on probation for a conviction of armed robbery. So he had held up a gas station or a small convenience store with a gun to get money so that they could get heroin. And he was required to regularly check in with his probation officer and participate in mandatory drug treatment for his addiction. Both Ed and Stephanie also had an appointment sometime during the last week of February at the local methadone clinic to get their addictions under control. So they were actually going to enter a program to finally kick so they were like voluntarily checking into rehab basically.
Right. So they're trying to get clean. Yeah.
They were trying to get clean. Neither showed up.
Mm.
In March of 1978, a person that worked at the methadone clinic contacted Smith and inquired as to where Stephanie and Ed was and when they could expect them to be at the clinic. And Smith told this person, "Oh, yeah, so I got a lot of really good pot and I have some Placidil and I'm going to detox Stephanie and Ed myself." But when Stephanie and Ed missed additional appointments at the clinic, the staff assumed that they had relapsed and they stopped contacting Smith because that happens a lot,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
As the months went by and Ed never checked in with his probation officer again after February 25th, a warrant was issued for his arrest in September of 1978. Later, Smith admitted to authorities that he had cashed that income tax check, as well as other checks that came to Stephanie after her disappearance by forging her signature and keeping the cash for himself.
Oh, Cool.
which is why, if you remember, when police searched his car, they found Stephanie's social security card in his car. He
Yeah.
was using it to cash her fucking checks.
Wow.
Now, all of this happened before Sue Reiner was killed and Karen and Michael went missing.
Wow.
Stephanie and Ed have never been seen again. Their bodies have never been found. Karen and Michael's bodies have never been found to this day. They're still missing, which is why the case is like still technically unsolved.
Yeah.
In 1998, Bradfield died of a heart attack at Greater Ford State Prison in Collegeville, which is located outside of Philadelphia. It's another little suburb where he was serving his 3 consecutive life sentences. He was 64 years old when he died, and he had only served 15 years.
Hmm.
So, like, not much. So
No.
he kind
Yeah.
of got out of it. After his death, prison officials were cleaning out his cell and they stumbled across a photograph in Bradfield's belongings. So they found this photograph and they were like, what the fuck? It was of a small statue sitting in the middle of a field of overgrown weeds. The prevailing theory behind this photograph is that this might be the spot where Bradfield disposed of Karen and Michael Reinert's bodies. But despite many, many tips that the police did follow up on, they were not able to find the statue. And to this day,
No.
they haven't been successful in finding where this statue is in this picture.
Wow.
Ken Reinert, Karen and Michael's father, he died of a heart attack in 2002, never knowing what really happened to his children.
Oh my God.
He was 59 years old. Sue Reinert was laid to rest at Thayer Cemetery in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania, the town in which she had grown up and where her parents had lived. Vince Velitis was interviewed by the FBI throughout this entire investigation for almost 100 hours. Like
Fuck.
they like put him through the ringer.
Yeah. Damn.
30 years later, a CNN reporter and its crime section producer by the name of Ann O'Neill, who had originally reported on Sue Reinert's murder, which was the first murder she actually ever covered in her career when she was 23 years old, sat down with Velitis, who by this point was closing in on 60 years old. So this was back in 2009 ish. Velitis was 27 at the time of Sue's murder and the disappearance and presumed murders of Karen and Michael. And he told Anne, quote, I don't think a day has gone by when I don't think about Susan Reiner and her children. They are frozen in time. Velitis considered Bradfield a very close friend. And when the truth unraveled and Velitis realized that he had been used and betrayed by Bradfield, he was crushed, mortified, devastated, all the feels. He had been told numerous lies by Bradfield. He had been used as an alibi unknowingly. Even though Bradfield was like, you got to be my alibi, he didn't
Yeah.
realize he was being used as an alibi by somebody who was actually doing murder.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It took him a really long time to work through that betrayal, to work through what Bradfield had put him through, his fear of Bradfield and what he was capable of. It took Velitis a really, really long time to work through all of that. And if you think about it from Velitis's point of view, if you have a really good friend, would it ever cross your mind that that person was capable of murder if that person was charming and charismatic and warm and personable? Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
knowing that there
It's
was
true.
this whole Jekyll and Hyde thing going on,
Mm-hmm.
it took a long time for Velitis to work through that. He mentioned to Anne in his interview with her that he was still angry at the way Bradfield manipulated him and made him an unwitting part of a murder plot. He was still pretty mad about that. Velitis, he's been an educator for more than 38 years now. He's still teaching at Upper Marion High School, and he's actually the chair of the English department now.
Wow. Okay.
So there were a lot of theories floating around because really, Bradfield and Smith professed their innocence until the day they both died. Smith was released, his conviction was overturned and vacated. He was free for the rest of his life after that. No one took any accountability or responsibility for the death of Sue and the presumed deaths of Karen and Michael, who, again, to this day, have never been found. So they're obviously not alive.
Right.
There were a lot of theories floating around. I mentioned a few. A lot of it had to do with like sex cults, Satan worshiping, swingers groups, bestiality. It was really, really like gross stuff that was floating around. And the reputation of Upper Marion High School really took a hit. And the kids and the parents and everybody was like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So my personal opinion is I think Bradfield killed Sue and Karen and Michael, and I think he intentionally set Smith up to take the fall. I don't think Smith actually had anything to do with the murders.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, Missy, my brother's sister in law, she suggested this case. Thank you again, Missy. This was a fucking doozy. But her brother in law, who's married to one of her sisters, Keith, gave me some very interesting information. And I would like to read a little bit about what he shared with me. Keith graduated from Upper Marion High School in 1976. So he was like there right in the middle of all of this shit going down. 3 years before Sue was murdered and the kids went missing, he had Sue Reinert and Vince Velitis as teachers.
Wow.
He said, I quote, "My mother was contacted by the school district to handle all teacher callouts and substitute replacements." So his mom worked for the school district too. "She was always privy to all rumors and information. Bradfield actually stopped by our house when this was all coming out to tell her not to believe everything she hears and to basically just stay out of the information chain." Upper
Whoa.
Marion was considered one of the elite school districts in the area. Though not officially on the main line, because these murders were also known in the media as the mainline murders, though this school was not officially on the main line, it was considered one of the elites. As news broke and the investigators exposed facts, it tore down the idea that the district was some kind of special educational institution. Once the players were exposed and tidbits about everyone were spelled out, it was certainly amazing, especially J. Charles Smith. I had graduated when this went down, but although amazed at the event, was not at all surprised by the players.
Hmm.
Kind of a blight or embarrassing piece of history for Upper Marion and King of Prussia. Smith was just plain nuts. Bradfield was always intimidating. Susan Myers was tough. Susan Reinert was mousy. Velitis was new to the district, and you could tell they just tried to belong.
Hmm.
So, Keith, thank you so much for sharing. I can't even imagine how crazy that must have been for you to go through that.
Yeah,
Um, and it's really a damn shame that a couple of bad actors can really fuck with the reputation of a really good school, a
exactly.
really good town. Like that's fucked up. And it's probably still kind of,
Tarnished.
yeah, yeah. So, anyway, that
Damn.
is the absolutely wild case of the murder of Sue Reiner and the disappearance and presumed murders of her children, Karen and Michael.
Damn, that was crazy.
Yeah, thank you for sticking with me. These are two very long episodes. There was so much. Hindsight, I probably should have done 3 parts, but I didn't. So here we go.
That was intense.
Yeah. Thank you for hanging in. This was a crazy one, Missy. Holy cow. You were right when you said, "Hey, I got a story for you."
Yeah, you weren't fucking
Absolutely.
around. And thank you for the suggestion.
Mhm.
That was
Mhm.
a
We
good one.
finally got to you. Thank you for being patient. As always, we thank everybody for tuning in. Please rate, review, subscribe. Tell your
Yeah.
friends. Tell everybody about us.
Yeah. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, on that note, bye, Jamie.
Goodbye, Carrie.
You peaky sworn. You peaky sworn.
You can't do that post bourbon.
This is good. Right? Tell me it's good.
Not cool, dickhead.
Just call me Mariah Carey. Oh my God.
It's fucking crazy.
Wait.